Hi everyone, my name is Grace and welcome to this episode of Gracie, the Kenyan Diaspora and Returnee. For those of you who are listening to us for the first time, we're so glad that you've joined us. This podcast is a forum for discussing everything diaspora and life as a returnee. To our returning guests, we thank you for listening too. I know it's been a minute, I think a little over 2 months, but we're back and we're glad that you've tuned in. In prior episodes, I have had guests, but today's episode is just me because I wanted to have a discussion with you on some conversations that went on during the Global Forum for Remittances, Investments and Development. The summit happened a bit over 2 weeks ago at the UN offices in Nairobi. I'm still so inspired by it that I thought I'll just do this recording to share with you some of the notes that I took and to trigger a conversation or maybe continue the conversation. The first session that I'll present here is on remittances, and there were conversations on the importance of empowering remittance families. Remittances are defined as the movement of money across borders usually. In Africa and Kenya especially, I'm glad to announce that we've been reaching record highs on remittances. Interestingly, this started during the COVID period, and every year since we have reached new record highs. And it's amazing to know that because it means that the diaspora continued to be engaged back home and the diaspora really came strong to support their families during a pandemic. During the summit, on conversations regarding remittances, we talked about how continued remittances will help to make migration a choice and not a necessity for those who rely on remittances. Let me repeat that. The importance of remittance is to make migration a choice and not a necessity. Oftentimes, and I know we've heard about this, we have many people in the African continent, and if I go even deeper in the African country where I'm from, where people have had to leave the country to go abroad to work just because they could not find a job. They are educated, they have undergrad degrees, they have master's degrees, and even beyond, yet they struggled to find work. And so imagine if remittance became a choice and not a necessity. How much better the continent would be in development, how much each of the African countries would be in terms of development, because even when educated people leave the country, they leave with them the knowledge that they have, the intelligence that they have, and that ends up becoming a drain. There was also a conversation on partnering with stakeholders to continue boosting remittances into the continent. And this is so important because the more stakeholders partner, the better the channels will be, the lower the costs will be, and the better the enabling environment when it comes to regulatory framework. At the moment, the African continent is one of the regions that are still high in terms of the remittance costs. This is the money or the fee that the person sending the money from the diaspora incurs to send money back home into their home country. It is still high in Africa compared to other regions. And as stakeholders, if we come together with any data we have, market intelligence, whatever it is, and even go to our regulators with maybe ideas on how we can improve the environment so that remittances remain safe and secure, but still more affordable. Imagine how much farther we would go as a country and a continent. At the moment, some of the regulatory frameworks are really prohibiting. It makes barriers to entry for the fintech, the money transfer operators harder, it takes them longer to penetrate the market, and then competition is not as friendlier. it's more stiff. And so the conversation here would be for us to come together as stakeholders and improve the remittance market, improve what we can do to boost remittances into the region. Another importance of boosting remittances into the continent has to do with supporting the diaspora, not only when they send money home for healthcare, food, and shelter needs of their family members, but to make it a more enabling environment for them to invest back home. We have many diaspora who want to come back home for retirement. We have many diaspora who even want to invest home and just have a vacation home. They may not want to retire here, but they want to be able to come home and have a holiday home. If we make remittance easier for them, if we make the environment easier for them to invest back home, remittances will increase, and the diaspora will also be able to meet their needs. And on this, I want to transition a little bit into the conversations that we had on diaspora investment. Many of us have had stories of diaspora that want to invest back home, buy land, build, buy an apartment, buy a home, but they have been swindled by family members, by friends, even by people, third-party providers that they thought were genuine and were not, like brokers. And we have also hosted prior episodes with Solomon Wangwe on the due diligence that the diaspora needs to make before they invest back home, from how they choose the property, from how they choose the provider that they need to work with. That is an important conversation that was had at the summit, and that needs to continue happening. With this, and with just the continuation of the conversation that happened at the summit, I'd like to mention to you that we shall be bringing on service providers that are trusted in the market, that are even endorsed by banks, to give you more knowledge as a diaspora on what you need to do. I know with Solomon Wangwe we talked about land investment. We shall also host similar conversations on property purchases, so an apartment, a home, and even how to manage that property if you choose to rent. So that will be coming on in the upcoming episodes, and please stay tuned. As I wrap up, I like a conversation that also happened on diaspora investments, and that was on the importance of us who are in Kenya or any other African region, and we are talking to the diaspora on investing back home. We were challenged as financiers, as banks, as just any industry that is involved in this, to understand the needs of the diaspora. We often just spit out what we want the diaspora to invest in, how we want them to borrow, but we were challenged to listen to their needs. Every diaspora is unique, not based on the region they're in. That is one aspect. The one in the Americas probably has a different need than the one in Middle East and Asia, but just even based on where they've reached in their lives. Their generation too, how our parents invest is different from how we invest. And there was a conversation on understanding the needs of the diaspora. And there was also a conversation in ensuring that what we encourage the diaspora to invest in is actually something that will have a return on the investment, and not only a return on the investment, but for those who are interested in making a social impact, that we will be able to meet that need for them. Oh, that really touched me, because as a former diaspora, one of the things that I really loved about coming home and traveling to other African countries with my friends was being able to make an impact. Not just in my home country, even in other countries. And this is where Pan-Africanism comes in. It's not just on improving your home country, but also the other African continents. And so I really enjoyed that conversation, and we shall continue that discussion, even go deeper in our upcoming episodes. There was also a conversation again on the government, the role of the government. We talked about that on remittances, but also on diaspora investments. And the conversation was on the need for the government to create an enabling ecosystem for the diaspora to invest, and for us to be innovating with the investment products and solutions. So creating an enabling ecosystem where the diaspora are able to invest without some of the hurdles that they have to pass. Just today, I'm in diaspora banking for those of you that don't know, but just today I was talking with a Kenyan diaspora in the US, and I was telling him about some of the documents that we need for account opening. And he's like, wow, Grace, why so many documents? And I had to walk him through, our environment is different. As much as we don't want the diaspora to keep comparing, the truth is they are also accustomed to streamlined systems, structures that are in place that make it easier for them to invest there. And all they're asking is for us to create such an easier environment. Let's make this diaspora investment thing an enjoyable journey for them. And this is where regulators and again stakeholders can come together and see how do we still ensure that we are protecting ourselves, that we are still following the rules of anti-money laundering and terrorist financing, but still making it easier and encouraging the diaspora to invest back home. There was also the conversation of how diaspora investments in Africa would go further if we learn from other communities. And an example of the Indian diaspora was given. I can tell you, I'm already digging in, looking at case studies on what that's like, because I did not even know about it, and I'm a diaspora banker. So just looking into what have other regions done, what have other diaspora done outside of African diaspora that has boosted their remittances and their investments back home? What can we learn from them? And then with that, improve diaspora remittances and investments back home. We were challenged, and we were challenged. And the closing statement that one of the presenters gave was that in Africa, we have a long way to go. And for us to succeed, we need to be bold and we need to think bigger. So as I wrap this up, I want to encourage all of us listeners, wherever you are in whatever role you're in, whether you're a diaspora, you're a returnee, or even a local, but you're in a space where you can make an influence. Let's have these conversations. Let's share them in whatever medium it is. I would encourage you to share it on this forum, on whatever channel you're listening on. Share the comments and let us continue this conversation on how we can think more boldly, bigger, outside the box to improve this. With that, thank you so much for listening. We'd like to hear from you. Our podcast is available on YouTube, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, LinkedIn, wherever you can find us. We'd like to hear from you. What are we missing? What can we do better? How else can we think outside the box to make diaspora remittances and investments in the African region bigger than it ever has been? How can we disrupt this? We'd love to hear from you. And with that, thank you so much for listening. Have a great day, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are.